Raw material quality control, there's a lot of stuff that goes into making a horse feed. So we read out the ingredients of the mare cubes before, and there was all that dicalcium phosphate, limestone, magnesium oxide, the trace mineral vitamin premix. There's heaps of ingredients we use in horse feed. Some of them are imported from overseas. A lot of them are local as well, but we do see problems with heavy metal contamination in these raw materials, and we also see problems with variation in mineral content. So where we think a dicalcium phosphate has got a certain amount of calcium and phosphorus, it doesn't necessarily. We shouldn't assume that just because we've sold a product called dicalcium phosphate that it's going to analyse exactly as dicalcium phosphate. So these are all problems that good feed manufacturers are aware of, and they actively control them, and they actively control them by testing their raw materials. So I don't know if you probably all remember back in 2008 there was a massive earthquake in China. And not long after that we started seeing reports of lead contamination in pig meat, and they actually traced it back to dicalcium phosphate that was coming from China that had massively high lead levels. So this is just some data. So Prydes test everything before it goes into their feed. Every mineral ingredient that is used gets tested before it goes anywhere near their horse feed. So these are just, are used from 2008 to 2010 only because that was the most interesting. It's been a bit boring lately. Everything's being tested as it should be, and there hasn't been too many problems. But we were testing, so this is dicalcium phosphate. We tested a dicalcium phosphate. It should test at around 22 to 24% calcium. The NRC say 22. We tested one at 39% calcium, so I don't know what it was. It wasn't dicalcium phosphate because it had way more calcium than it should have. And the average that it was tested at was 26, so it was very, very different to a book value for dicalcium phosphate. And the problem with that is when I'm doing the formulations for their balancer pellets, so say their 150 pellet that should have 3.8 grams per kilogram of, or 3.6, no, 3.8 grams per kilogram of calcium in it. If I was using the tested average and I can get the calcium level bang on where it should be, if I unsuspectingly used the 39% calcium dicalcium phosphate that was there, we would have had closer to 5 grams of calcium per kilogram of feed, which is a huge, 5%, which is 50 grams. So instead of being 38, it would have been 50. It's a huge difference in calcium content. But because we knew that these raw materials were jumping around so much, we were on top of that. This is a really, really recent thing that's happened. So 30th of June, like only a month and a bit ago, a magnesium oxide analysis came back. So magnesium oxide, the guaranteed specification from this particular supplier was 54% magnesium, and for whatever reason, and I don't really understand, but whenever they made their magnesium oxide they completely stuffed up. This stuff was testing at 38.7% magnesium. So if we'd just happily been trundling along and chucking this magnesium oxide into feeds thinking it was 54% magnesium, the feeds would have ended up being much lower in magnesium than they should have been because the raw material wasn't on specification. And we actually sent this, like we said to the lab, can you test that again, because seems really weird. And they tested it again, and it tested low, and then we asked the supplier to test it and it tested low, and the whole lot, there was about 10 tonne of it sitting at Pryde, the whole lot has been sent back to the supplier, and we had to scour the country and find stuff that was the right specification so that we didn't have to use any of this low stuff. So just things to be aware of. This is from back in 2008 to 2010 again, some dicalcium phosphate and heavy metals. We tested one dical phosphate that had really high levels of arsenic. It got rejected, wasn't used, and another one that was really high in mercury. I can't remember which one, but one of those lots of dicalcium phosphate went to a dairy farm. And they put it in the feed that they feed to their dairy cows, and we of course then drink their milk. So your horses are safe, you may not be.